guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called Buildings in Berlin Are Weird. This is from a channel called Houseman, so check it out. I didn't know that in Berlin the buildings are weird. How weird could they be? I guess we'll find out. So let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe.
What you're looking at here is a 120-year-old photograph taken in Berlin. The buildings still stand, but today the one on the right looks quite different. As you can see, all the ornamentation is gone, and what is left is a somewhat incomplete structure. This phenomenon is called Entstuckung, which is the deliberate removal of stucco from buildings. It happened all over Germany, and nowhere is it more visible than here in the German capital.
Why did they do that?
In fact, you can hardly walk down any of the city streets without noticing one of these odd houses. They are everywhere.
Well, to me, like, without context, they don't look weird. I mean, if you show me the photograph of the before, maybe I'll be able to parse the details. But just looking at them like this, I don't think they're weird. They're just, I don't know, like, very, very European. They're very German.
But why? When the Germans began tearing down stucco, they never intended to remove it all. Many buildings, despite being covered in ornaments, were
okay, but why would they exactly want to remove stucco? Like, what's wrong with it?
Even considered. Strange as it may seem, there is an explanation for this. Turns out, nearly all the buildings stripped of stucco date back to a specific period, the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Well, it was like 40 years.
To understand what caused this development, we'll begin our journey in Dresden. By the mid-19th century, the Industrial Revolution had
1800s.
reached Saxony. Factories attracted workers from the countryside, and the population in Dresden exploded. New boroughs sprung up, and they took on a new shape. For one, the streets were different. Twisting alleyways were now substituted with straight boulevards. Moreover, the buildings differed.
Oh, they had
Industrial
to build
techniques allowed for rapid construction, but these, then new, apartment buildings looked nothing like what we today associate with mass-produced housing. Instead, they looked old.
Well, but
that
they
is
look
because they were
beautiful.
products of a movement called historicism. As the name suggests, historicism drew inspiration from the past. It gained popularity for various reasons, with the most significant being industrialization. With more people finding themselves in rapidly changing and impersonal environments,
They wanted something
need for
familiar.
stability grew.
Yeah, it's funny that the further, like, I don't know, technology advanced, the more they were looking into the past for something that we know.
As such, architects and artists began using elements from styles that harken back to simpler times. Gothic arches,
weird.
Greek
Well,
columns, and
It's not that weird if I think about it, because I think, don't we do that these days? So it's kind of the same, but of course for their time period.
timbered facades all re-emerged, not only in Germany, but throughout the West. This resulted in some of the world's most iconic structures. And, upon closer inspection, you'll notice something interesting. Many of these buildings didn't simply borrow from a particular style, but also began mixing various ones, giving rise to structures that could almost be considered new styles themselves.
Yeah, of course, because just a mix and match of just old things, which I guess, yeah, it's what we do these days, right? We're just like mixing and matching several periods.
The term for this is eclecticism, which marks the peak craziness or awesomeness for this whole movement. Take this example from Dresden. At its core, we have a brick building, which is typical for the area. But look closer and you'll find Romanesque and Gothic arches, Baroque domes, and the most striking feature of them all, a timbered framed attic.
Yeah,
Obviously,
it's weird.
Most buildings didn't take it this far, but you get the idea.
We have like 5 different styles.
Okay, so you had all these buildings using some design elements that were popular in the past. Where exactly is the problem? Well,
yeah, there's not
just
a problem.
a few kilometers away from Schillerplatz was a young architecture student who was witnessing this movement firsthand. His name was Adolf Loos, and he would go on to become one of its most vocal critics.
Okay,
a
never
path
heard of him.
that would eventually lead him to Prague. Turns out, Adolf, this one, had a quite different view of what constitutes a good building. and his designs leave no doubt that ornamentation was no part of it.
Oh, he likes simple
In his famous
lines.
essay, Ornament and Crime, Lewis attacks his contemporaries from
Ornament and crime, which is really funny. Like, you just committed a crime. I'm looking at it, and it's a precursor, I think, of like something that's more brutalist to me. Just very simple, sort of like, this is it, that's it, no details.
various angles, where perhaps his most widespread critique, also commonly echoed today, is that ornamentation is disingenuous.
Oh, I thought it was distracting.
Consider a Gothic cathedral or a timbered framed house. These buildings look the way they do, in part because the technique necessary to construct them is visible in the design. Gothic arches and flying buttresses made it possible to build enormous cathedrals. Likewise, the structural integrity of these cute wooden houses comes from their frames.
Actually, this is funny because I've never actually detailed. I can look at it and it's pretty, but I'm not thinking about how it's structurally, like how it was built. It's just, to me, I don't know, it's just like little pretty details.
Therefore, Lewis would consider these honest structures as they reflect local knowledge from a certain time.
Interesting.
Now, our eclectic example, on the other hand, doesn't really use these design elements out of necessity. The frames are plastered on, and the arches serve no unique purpose.
Yeah, it's just
Therefore,
to
they,
add.
like many of the other elements, serve a decorative role,
Correct.
which to Lewis renders them fake. Moreover, since these are essentially cultural expressions, Lewis also questioned their artistic value. Back then, ornaments were often mass-produced instead of being unique pieces of art.
Oh, so it's like, yeah, you're fake. You have a mass-produced ornament that's not really real.
Lastly, he compared ornaments to wearing a mask. Not only does it hide a building's true function and material, but it could also be seen as a symptom of a society caring more about appearance than solving
That's
real
what's
problems,
in the inside.
such as poor living conditions.
Wow.
Alright,
That's very
as we now have an
philosophical.
understanding of the essay, it becomes clear why its proponents went on to design very different buildings.
Yes.
Lewis himself became a modernist pioneer, advocating for his own concept called Raumplan, as well as emphasizing the importance of craftsmanship.
I actually
Other
like this one.
modernists didn't necessarily share all his convictions, but they too rejected ornamentation for the reasons laid out. The well-known case here being the Bauhaus movement.
Exactly.
Eventually, these ideas began to flourish in liberal Weimar Germany, and in addition to all the new modern buildings being constructed, the first wave of stucco removal emerged. Berlin in particular became a laboratory, so to speak. As the capital and the cultural center of the Republic, it attracted architects eager to redesign historicist
Everyone was doing
facades.
whatever.
How many buildings they were able to transform remains unknown. But
Yeah, of
generally
course.
speaking, the first wave of de-stuckification was minor. Take this example from Bohemia. Here, there are several modifications, and apart from the porticos, the most striking difference is the simplification of the facades.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm trying to look at the actual details and see what they were planning. Or I don't know if they actually did transform this, but it's kind of like, it looks similar, but not really. It's one of those spot the difference.
A closer look reveals that this is partly due to the absence of stucco. Now, if you visit this town today, the stucco is still there. These large-scale projects were only meant to begin after a Nazi victory. This is why during the whole regime, Entstuckung remained a scattered phenomena, mostly affecting isolated buildings like this one in Nuremberg.
Yeah.
What would be the true
bigger fish to
catalyst
fry.
leading to widespread adaptation was, however, the war. As many German cities had been heavily damaged, questions about their future began to surface. One concern in particular was what to do with all the damaged facades. Besides being scars from a brutal past, crumbling stucco also posed a safety hazard. With no resources to spend on extensive facade renovations, tearing it down was often the pragmatic choice.
Yes,
That
I
being
get
said, this massive wave wasn't solely driven by pragmatists. Other countries, also greatly impacted by the war, saw no similar push. Therefore, one might speculate that one of the main drivers was German guilt fueling a desire to escape its past. If so, this could explain why Berlin, in particular, became the epicenter. Regardless, modernist ideals became dominant on both sides of the Iron Curtain. Thus, the reshaping of historicist facades to mimic clean, modern aesthetics was mostly encouraged. This would go on for almost 20 years.
Also, I think it was maybe a part of it of like, let's leave things behind. This is a new chapter.
Before significant pushback emerged. Leading the revolt was an architect named Werner Duttmann. Interestingly, Duttmann himself was a modernist who had begun to question the rationale behind de-stockification.
Oh my god, I love it. I love that he, after being a proponent of it, he started actually thinking things through and being like, you know what, I changed my mind.
In his view, the removal of stucco from historicist buildings was an attack on their authenticity. These buildings were simply products of a specific era, and by transforming them to something else, they lost that historical connection.
I kind of agree with it.
It was argued that because the facades were designed to be ornate, removing all the stucco made the buildings look awkward and incomplete.
Correct. They look
weird. By the
weird.
70s, public opinion had shifted and preservation efforts became widespread.
Yeah, that's another
Fast
thing.
forward to today, and many historicist buildings are now protected. What's more, the districts where you find them tend to be among the most popular in every German city. Now, it is important to note that this is not entirely due to aesthetics. Historicist districts are always more than just the facades, as they feature a distinct urban pattern. Nonetheless, ornaments are once again in vogue. The city of Berlin has introduced guidelines for restoring these facades, and nationwide, there is a rise of a new movement which is ever so slightly reintroducing stucco.
This is so funny.
Who knows? Maybe the future of German architecture can be found in its past.
That's usually how it goes. Yeah, I was thinking about that, and because I think so many things are cyclical when it comes to culture, when it comes to fashion, when it comes to architecture, art. There's just so many things that are just very, they follow a cycle, and during for a number of years, probably people are very into like this particular thing, and then it's falling out of style. Everyone hates it. And then, 50 years later, people are like, wait, this is back in fashion again. And we can see this happen time and again. Everything's really cyclical. I think there are few things. We can invent new things, right? It's an invention, but it follows the pattern. So obviously based on things that have already been invented in a way. We can't really just outright invent things when it comes to, again, cultural things, because everything already has been invented. We can reimagine it, we can mix and match, and we can create new forms, coming from the basis of things that we already know. But this is a great example of this. It's like, yeah, we're creating new styles. It's a revival of certain things, but everything's based on something that came before. And I think obviously because like so many things, in society, in culture, in art, again, in life in general, you didn't just fall, everything has a context. Things don't just happen, overnight of like you just fell down of the sky and this is what was created. No, everything obviously has a purpose and everything comes from something, just as people are born, like you were born from someone, like this is, and they're born from someone else. Everything, doesn't spontaneously sort of, exist as life, basically. Everything comes from something that came a little bit earlier and it evolves, but again, it's something that we can see time and time again. And it's funny because it follows both science and it follows also, again, cultural things and even architecture. It's really funny if you start thinking about it, because it holds to something like long enough and maybe it's going to come back in fashion and in style. Maybe it's not going to happen in 10 years, but maybe it's going to be 50 years, 80 years, 100 years. But my point is that give something long enough and it will become popular again. So it's one of those, this is one of those things which I think I find really, really funny, is that, give it enough time. Now it's back, after people were like, oh, we hate this style, this architectural style. It's hideous. Give it, get rid of it. And now everyone got rid of it. And now apparently, I think the building that they were showing us, I think it was from 2017. And it's like, yeah, now it's coming back. And then again, who knows what's going to happen? Give it 50 years, 40 years, and people are going to be, we hate ornamentation. Like, give me the clean, simple lines again. So again, I love that. The other thing is that I was thinking about how, because obviously in cultural movements, and I think that includes architecture as well, There's two things. It's constantly they're a reflection of a bigger thing that's happening in society, in life, in political movements, in everything. They're truly a reflection of what life was like in certain time periods. And it's very clear once you get into it. I think sometimes when you look at buildings and when you're like walking down a city, you don't really, like stand and realize and like analyze what's up with this building, like how it was created, how old is it. It's just, you're just walking around because you're like living your life. So it's not necessarily that you're really analyzing like each building. But I think it's a great, like, you can do that. Like, it's a great thing to do, on one Sunday morning. I don't know, just walk around and take a look at the buildings that surround a certain city and see, like, how the architecture is, like, what does that tell you? And of course, you need to have your little guide of, like, when was this built and by who was it built? Obviously, not all buildings are going to be famous. But, it gives you an idea and it gives you a sense of, oh, when was this built? Like, why was it built like this? Like, everything has a purpose. And usually it follows that if you start to look into it, you'll realize that a lot of those buildings, and because every single building, obviously, especially when it was built in a certain time period, like you'll see the pattern, and it's that pattern usually follows something else. That yes, it was a precursor of something, or people were starting to reflect. The architects and the artists wanted to reflect something that was happening, in real life, and how culture was life and how life was like in those days. And this is a reflection of this building. It's a reflection of how life was back in those days. And I love it because you can really do see it in the buildings, and you sometimes at first glance you don't really get to see that. And it's videos like this, for instance, that really do make you sort of open your mind and be, oh yeah, I can see why. And you can apply this to so many other cities, to so many other things. Again, because this is very particular to obviously the history of Berlin, but name another city, go to another city, and you'll find something similar. Obviously, the history is going to be different because obviously each city has its own history. But the reasons tend to be the same. It's like, oh yeah, everyone was trying to everything moved in this case, because everyone was starting to work in factories, so they started moving there, and there was a necessity to we have to now build this city, and we have to do it in a different way. And then they wanted to, again, it's really funny as well to me, the whole of once something starts again, which also they can be applied to so many things, especially I think when it comes to art and different sculptures, and it can just art in general, because obviously architectural styles, that is an art form as well. I think it's something once something, maybe you see a little bit less of this these days, but back in those days, it was something very significant. Is that once something started being widespread use, basically, everyone was starting to design their buildings in this particular way. Then, someone comes, a group comes, someone comes and goes, you know what, because they started analyzing this and I don't think this is right. I can't remember the name of the guy that was like, we have to get rid of it. We have to get rid of the ornaments. Because again, he started analyzing and be like, this, I don't really like this. And it's more not necessarily an aesthetically, I don't like it aesthetically. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I don't know all his reasons. Maybe some of it was also in the background of, I just don't like how this looks, aesthetically. I don't find all those ornaments and all those things pleasing. But also, you just start analyzing like he did, and the theory was like, no, I don't really like this because it hides the purpose of us that we have as architects of, it has to be seamless. You're not going to be seeing how this building, I think it is distracting on one hand because you're seeing all those beautiful details that again, well, it depends. Maybe you don't like it because again, it's something very personal. If you don't like this one style, or maybe you prefer the other. So you start thinking all those ornaments and all those stuff, it's really distracting from the building itself. And I can see why an architect, that's his mindset. He would be, no, this is really distracting of the actual sort of a structure of this building, of this house. Well, building, not necessarily a house, but of this building, because all those ornaments are just quite distracting. They're very artistic. Also, one of the things, it's really funny, is that I can see why some, because I find it prettier, like, I'm not gonna lie. Well, I find both styles quite nice. I think it just depends, but I don't necessarily hate one another. I love all those beautiful details, the buildings with all those details, the ornamentation, all of it. I think it looks very classical, it looks beautiful, but I also really like the simplicity of the other buildings as well. So I like both of them, but I can understand why someone would be, oh my god, no, this ornamentation is awful. And besides, I can tell why maybe some people back then would have thought, oh, we have to make it a little bit prettier, like this building has to look a little bit nicer. It's gonna look more opulent, probably, again, classical, pretty, and because, we want to show an image, we want to give an image of, oh, how beautiful something looks. But yeah, on the inside, which something very, very modern, at least to me, of this guy telling us, like, no, this is actually going to distract from what's the inside, and what's the inside hiding. Because when something looks so nice from the outside, and it's so, again, so beautifully like detailed and so many like different things, what's really on the inside? It's something, again, well, yeah, great question. Sometimes everything that's shiny isn't always going to be gold. I think it's a little bit of that as well. Of sometimes things look very pretty, they would look very nice and shiny from the outside, but once you get to, you get into the inside, oh, things are not that nice. But I think it's because people want to project this image of everything's beautiful, everything's nice, everything's perfect. And even if you go further beyond this, again, not to get all whatever and being over analyzing all of this, but it's really true. And this is it happened in the 1800s, I think. But it's the same as social media these days. Yes, people want to project like this beautiful, nice image, but if you actually, I think if you're overly sort of overcompensating for something, it's gonna be something there. It's, oh, but how the inside looks like, you don't really know how those people, like how their real life looks like. And sometimes, overly sort of, that over projection means that you're overcompensating for something, and that's, on the private sort of quarters of your life. And I think that's sort of like, it's the same thing. Of course, they were hiding like poverty and poor living conditions. And it's just because obviously, but you don't want to project that image of, oh, we live in squalor. No, so that's why everything was so shiny and pretty. And I can tell why then he would have probably hate that. He was like, no, we can't really, why are we hiding this? This is sort of a facade of something that's hiding, this facade hides something deeper and something darker, which, yes, true. And also, again, to go a little bit further beyond, he was thinking, oh, you want to see this very like nouveau rich thing of, oh yeah, give me like all those classical things and everything's going to be overly detailed. But then it's not really like about the art, because it's not, you want to be seen as artistic. You want to be seen as, oh, I have the money to like spend on beautiful things that don't really have a purpose. But at the same time, it's like, what's the artistic purpose of this if everything's being mass produced? It's not as if, you hired this sculptor, this artist to make a sculpture and to make all these ornaments you're going to put in your building. Yeah, it's not, obviously, people, well, I guess a lot of people did that, of course, those with the capabilities of doing so. But I can tell why, when it was being mass produced, if everything also looks the same, then how come, like, what's the artistic purpose of this? It's not just, it's like, I don't know, mass produced fast fashion, for instance, I don't know, liken it to something else. Or even just, again, in life, right now, everything's mass produced. So, like, what's the beauty and what's the artistic purpose of this? If everyone has it, like, what point? In art, actually, it's that it's only, it's one of a kind. It's only made, for what, in this particular case, you commissioned this, someone, did this thing, either that is, an ornament, an art piece, a painting, a dress, something. It's, I think part of the value is obviously that someone does it for you, is custom made, and it's in the value of the artist, again, not fabricating this in a mass-produced factory. It's just this, artisans, that are handcrafting this specific thing. And that's really where the art, the art part of it comes from, and where the value comes from. And I can tell why he was criticizing that. And again, it's something that can be criticized, in our day and age as well. So, he was a visionary. I think a lot of his ideas can be reflected and can be actually, again, you can also liken this to so many other things in life. But yeah, I want to go now and see like this. I want to go, maybe they do actually. They do this architectural sort of tour in Berlin. and they probably like, I will love it if, you know, people, you know, the store with architects or someone that obviously has knowledge about this actually like does a tour and explains, you know, this, you know, like he mentioned, he showed us the photograph at, you know, from the, I think it was 130 years, and he like, someone shows you and tells you that like this building, this was the original building, and then, you know, back in the, when, you know, this Renaissance period came, like they started like removing the stucco, removing everything. But then of course as things change, you know, it wasn't completed, and then, you know, people started looking at things different, and we're like, wait, hold this process, leave it as it is. I don't know. And of course I think, again, you know, because like society changes and so many things change, it's, you know, it's constantly evolving. And I think architectural styles and buildings themselves, and in a way cities as well, they're constantly evolving, because as we can see, it's not something that just remains stagnant throughout, but it can remain stagnant for periods of time. But, you know, looking at the actual, you know, 200 years period, you know, in 100 years period, of course things are going to change, because societies change, people change, you know, mindsets change. And, you know, you can see a reflect on this, and cities are constantly evolving, you know, they're living things, they're constantly changing. And I love that, well, right now we start about things, you know, we think about things different, and we're thinking, no, how are we going to like remove things from very old things? You know, it's a building that's 200 years old, 150 years old. We can't be like removing things. No, we have to probably remodel them. We have to, maybe because again, some of them are like crumbling for, you know, a number of reasons. We have to remodel this. We have to rebuild this. And again, it's probably because now we're thinking we're in the period of, we have to like, there are, if all something's old enough, like we have to preserve it. But again, it's our mindset, you know, our modern mindset. But I can tell why, you know, 200 years ago, people didn't really have that mindset. So who knows what's going to happen like 200 years from now, if we're still going to be in that mindset of we have to really keep things as they are, or maybe it's going to be something completely different, and maybe it's going to be, no, like demolish everything. We have to like get rid of the past. I don't know. Who knows where we'll be. But that's it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.